Picks is back on KFAN. We have 9 chances for you to win $1,000 every weekday. It's every hour from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. 10 keywords to learn more at KFAN.com.
Sounds like it's the Wolves are a Peacock game tonight, so it'll be a little later start than usual at about 8:30 this evening. Let's see if I can get what I'm looking for here. There it is. I don't think this has yet been confirmed, although someone else may tell me that they have more recent information. Wall Street Journal is reporting, and their reporting from Minneapolis has been outstanding, I might add. Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino will imminently leave Minnesota along with some of his agents, according to administration officials familiar with the matter. Is that a sign of a larger step of, backing off? I don't know. It's a good start, one could say, based on some of the lies that he has offered up post the killing on Saturday. But it's too early, I think, maybe to celebrate. We'll see if it's part of any sort of larger significant change in strategy. As I said, the words this morning were more conciliatory from the governor. I should say from the president. I don't know if the governor has described the conversation he had with the president in the same terms that the president described that conversation or not. And there's still, to me, as always, the devil is going to be in the details on exactly where that might go. But thought that I would pass along that Wall Street Journal report to you. I want to follow up on the Anthony Edwards deal, and I'll take some text on it. As I said, it's 64686. That I'm trying to figure out again why we assume and in many cases demand a level of knowledge and interest that I just don't generally mean that much to me. In other words, wherever I am on a given position, on a given story, a given set of circumstances, I've said this before, the idea that this goes back, I guess, to the whole role model thing. It's for athletes, in terms of making sure they weigh in on whatever the urgent subject is of the day. And to me, the dishonesty of it, the intellectual dishonesty of it is that what you're really saying most of the time is, if I could believe that you meant what you said, I just like when athletes weigh in on various subjects of importance. And by the way, I'll respect it, even if I disagree with the position that they've taken. I might accept that, but I don't believe most people who get as worked up as they do over, let's say, what Anthony Edwards did or didn't say, that's what they mean. If they're honest with themselves, what they mean is, I need you to speak up and to articulate my rage, to articulate my view on whatever the issue is. And there's something so preposterous about putting that much power in the hands of people who are very good with a basketball or a football or a baseball, whatever, or serving with a tennis racket, serving a tennis, whatever it is. I've never understood it. I know they have outsized, I guess, standing, which means that they are in a position where if they speak, they're going to be heard. That part, I think, has happened, but it's very strange how we got to this place, because I don't think it's healthy, because I just don't think we should ever put that much authority in the figures of people who, as I said, are good. I'd say the same thing about an actor or a musician. Now, again, if you go back over the decades, our conversations with Robert Smith go all the way back to when I was a writer and he was one of my favorite people to go to when important issues of the day came up. I was all for it. I liked listening to him because I think he thought about these things and had interesting things to say. I didn't always agree with him. A lot in our audience, by the way, over the years have not always agreed with him, especially some of his opinions on law enforcement. So I'm not here to say I didn't like it, but I just don't think, I think people are dishonest about what they mean when they say, I want him to speak up more. No, you want him to speak up more on behalf of whatever the cause is. And right now, it's a pretty significant cause. I'd be the first to tell you in this case. But it's a more general belief of, I just wish there, as I said, there'd be a little more intellectual honesty about that sort of thing. In any case, let's do this. We got bonus bucks. Let's go ahead and do it. We'll get those. We'll try to stay somewhat on schedule. What we're probably going to do on our production meeting, we have, I think, 2 segments of Andy Luger. Is that correct?
I think we have one big one.
Well, we can. We may have to
split it.
We have to split them and then maybe do it that way, where we run part 1, maybe halfway or in that, whatever works from a standpoint, your standpoint, production standpoint, at about 4:30, and then maybe we get into some more of it in the 5 o'clock hour of the broadcast as well. 64686, that's the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. Bonus bucks?
Yes, the fan wants to give you those shot to win bonus bucks, the National Cash Contest. Head to KFAN.com. The keyword is friend this hour. Keyword friend. KFAN.com. Keyword friend. Ever miss your chance to know what's going on with latest sports news in town, chances to win tickets, or just knowing what's happening with your favorite KFAN shows? Follow KFAN 1003 on all of our social channels like Instagram, TikTok, and X. You can stay connected and follow the sports leader, KFAN.
A multitude of texts coming in. We're going to read some of them. Did you find Larry Mandela guy's number yet, or is that still to be done?
Oh, I got to go in there and do that.
He heard about it because he tweeted at me that he was devastated. But I want to make it clear, it wasn't a statement on Larry Mandela guy's material. It really wasn't. It was a complete and utter, we call it in the business a clerical error. I just don't know how to undo it, because I probably don't know the best form of, or how to work this system all that well. But I'm sure you'll be right on it. Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line is open at 64686. 651 guy writes, we care about our local teams and the athletes who play for them. We feel they represent us. When they succeed, we feel we have succeeded. We are crushed when they fail. Thus, when the community is hurting, we want to know that the athletes are hurting as well. We want to believe that they're one of us. It's a noble sentiment, and I get it on some level. I just don't think it really reflects reality, but it is, I guess, part of what sells the notion that I'm rooting for this guy because he plays for my team. I just think there's limits to how far it can be carried. Let me get to a few more here. We got some time. Regarding athlete activism, I agree, Dan, but I think the calls for it come from how sport has profited and promoted the notion of sport standing for unity and bringing people together. From that standpoint, I think it's more on owners and decision makers in those organizations to carry that stewardship and responsibility forward in their community, so it's not just lip service but much more so than an obligation or duty of any individual athlete. Preposterous of us and arrogant to presume we should demand they speak out. How many disingenuous people would want Ant to speak out more until perhaps he says something like, I actually feel ICE is a valuable tool for our nation's law and order. I think we all just need to take a step back and let them do their jobs. How many people would want to start burning their number 5 jerseys then? I mean, he spoke up on the issue, did he not? Oh, but it wasn't in alignment with your position, I guess. So, I feel like people expect it from Ant and the rest of the team because this topic hits home to the people of Minnesota. I've never denied that. It's a very deep gut level. It's almost what's the word? It's inescapable at this point. The way it has played out here, 100% that indeed would be true. Most actors and pro athletes haven't done their homework before they offer opinion. It's just their opinion, which they're entitled to, but the public needs to check the facts instead of jumping on the bandwagon. Well, again, in the state we're in, it tends to be you'll laud it if you agree with it and not so much if you indeed don't. Cat versus Ant public statements. Cat, I think, is more thoughtful. No, by the way, 7 years older. That's naturally more mature. That's part of the point that Johnny and I were discussing. Ant is 24, and like most of his age, myself included, some 50 years ago, just don't think deeply about those weighty issues. Here's the larger issue for me, and let's try to get beyond this particular trauma and just talk more generally that my preference would be to hear from people who think they have something to say on the subject, have studied it. The idea of just trying to line up as many people as possible, it seemed phony to me. And we've learned the hard way. You know, Michael Jordan used to be under siege because he did not take that many positions. He has more recently, but he didn't for many, many years. And I tended, now you could say he was dodging it. You could say it was gutless. I think part of it was not everybody is Muhammad Ali. I mean, it defined him. It was natural to him. It was important to him. Now, he also lived in a different age. But I'm willing to accept the possibility that some people just might not be very good at it or interested in it or good at articulating whatever it is, whatever that particular controversy might be. Celebrity opinions mean nothing. Why do you whine about ICE but ignore systematic issues around immigration? The mentality of if you're not with me, you're against me is one of the things killing this country. NPR just aired a conversation with Walz that he had a productive phone call with Trump. The report told Walz that Bovino was going to be removed immediately. Walz was surprised and said, quote, "That shows that the president is making good on our call." If he cared, he would be forthright with his opinion. Having to prompt his stance is what's wrong with society. Well, it does create the possibility that he doesn't even believe it. And I'm not sure that gets us to any place better than if we just say, well, it's just not going to necessarily be down his road. It sounded like Bovino was leaving and that his CBP agents would leave with him in exchange for, quote, more Walz-Frey police cooperation. My guess is, and I got this feeling strongly from Andy Luger yesterday, we're going to play back part one of our interview with him at the bottom of the hour, is that there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes regarding strategy, negotiation, to see if there's, you know what the cliche is, an off-ramp here. That to a certain extent, at least in the short run, everybody can accept. What has happened to Karen? I guess I'm Karen, according to this texter. Dan, you sound like you should be on The View. What if, God forbid, Ant says he stands with ICE, you would crucify him? John blames the Wolves' loss on the fact that one of the players' wives is an immigrant. Really? Is she illegal? That's Jenny in Plymouth. Jenny, I don't even know what to say to you about that. I mean, if you believe that certain issues might resonate given this environment more dramatically than with others, does it matter? I don't know how much more evidence you need. That I'll again point back to Chris Mattel, a Republican, a law and order guy if there ever was one, a Walz-Ellison agitator who says, I'm out because I can't stand with the Republican Party and their national policy of retribution. His point being, this isn't just targeted enforcement of illegals. This is a lot wider than that. In his belief, unconstitutional. So in that environment, is it possible that might affect some people who have immigrants in their family more than others, whether they're legal or illegal? There are many illegals that have been stopped. So that's going to resonate with them a little bit more. That's what I would suggest to you. That's Jenny in Plymouth. And I said back to her, I just got done saying on the idea of what if Ant had a different view. The last segment I said, people only want Ant to speak if he says what they want to hear. Are you even listening? That's the position we were taking. This is from Judd out of Chicago. It's been recently reported that there's body cam footage of the Preddy killing. My guess is that this is one of the main catalysts of this new, more conciliatory tone and approach from the Trump administration. They know that the footage refutes that Preddy was the attacker narrative. That and the polls that show Trump is taking a beating from this are the likely causes for this news. It's good that Walz is giving them a way to save face and leave. Very JFK of him, and I don't support Walz, but this is smart of him. I agree with all of this. I don't even know how true it is, but I agree with it in at least in theory. And this is, frankly, what I've heard from people behind the scenes involved in this story in one way or the other who've said, I've mentioned it on sermons, that probably the only way out of the box to get to a better place is if the Trump administration decides we're starting to get pounded across the board enough, it's starting to look bad, it's going to cost us votes, it has a chance to cost us power. We got to find a way out. Now, I don't expect at any point that they will admit to any wrongdoing, but that doesn't mean they might look for some way going sideways on this or going in another direction on this. That might indeed well be true. And I would say I'm as curious to see, I said this yesterday, I want to see as much footage of all angles beyond even what we've seen to even interpret and understand. But as far as I'm concerned, in regards to the Preddy being the attacker narrative, that's already been debunked. The video is clear on that. It couldn't be clearer that they end up approaching him more than he approaches them. It's clear as day, and that's part of why nothing can be trusted that has come out of this administration in that regard. It's there. You can pretend not to see it, and you can make it about the gun, but that's later in this discussion about the attacker. It's just, I'm sorry, I like I said, we try to follow the story, and that's the story on that part of it. All right, bottom of the hour break, part one of our discussion, our extensive discussion with former U.S. Attorney Andy Luger. If you heard it the first time, I apologize for offering it a second, but as I mentioned earlier, our Sunday audience is very loyal. We love them. But the Monday audience, the weekday audience, tends to be bigger. A lot of people just take their time off on Sunday. So we thought we'd get a second shot at it for our weekday listeners as well. And some of it is absolutely worthy, I think, of playing back on today's show. Top 5 at 5 yet to come, and more in the 5 o'clock hour as well. Stay tuned. Did you say a high of 14 tomorrow?
It's 14 right now.
Oh, it's 14 now.
Let's see.
I thought I saw, like, by Friday it might be a high of 25, or is that later, is in the weekend maybe?
So Friday it'll be 9, Saturday up to 16.
My God.
Sunday 23.
Sunday 23.
So then it comes around a little bit.
Okay. And no snow, right?
Not that I see.
Yeah.
It's about time.
Yeah, it is. It's we're all kind of weary from all of that, I think. There's no question about it. Bumper to Bumper is the name of the show. Guardsy out. He's following goal to go for women's basketball again. Brett Blakemore will be with me today, tomorrow, and Wednesday as well. We chatted yesterday. Sermons became a non-refuge when it comes from, generally it's a toy department show exclusively. There have been some exceptions, and yesterday was one of those. And we had a lengthy conversation with former U.S. Attorney Andy Luger, who's become a pretty frequent contributor to this program. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to play about, what do you say, about half of it now? And then about the same, probably about 5:30 or so, we'll play the other half of it. So we'll give different audiences a chance to listen to parts of it. We covered a lot of ground. Not anything significant has changed today, although I guess you could argue the one change might be some moderation in tone. Maybe Bovino's gone, which would be a departure from what took place yesterday. But a lot of the stuff, I think, is still very current and we wanted to give our weekday listeners an opportunity to hear, I think, always analytical and fairly interesting and dispassionate stuff from the former U.S. attorney. So let's start right now. Andy Luger has been with us many times over recent years, former Minnesota U.S. attorney. He is kind enough to join us now via the Connecticut Water Systems Hotline. Andy, thanks for the time. Where do we begin here for you? I mean, I guess I'll throw you the toss-up question of what you observed yesterday, what you think happened yesterday morning in South Minneapolis.
Thanks. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. As we've talked about before, with the shooting of Renee Good, first things first, there has to be a full investigation of the circumstances, what happened, all the videos, the eyewitness accounts. Some of that will happen. I used to say in the good old days that will happen, and we'll get the facts out. It's less certain right now because of the way these are being conducted. But I do know that experts from the BCA have begun. And you and I and everybody listening can watch the videos wherever one finds them, and there are quite a few. Here's the question that I've been asking of myself and others about this incident, this tragedy, and the Renee Good tragedy, and this entire fiasco of Operation Metro Surge. Why is this even happening? The conclusion of a thorough investigation may come up with different answers. It looks bad to me just watching the video in terms of the way law enforcement talks about it, and the terminology may not be appealing to listeners, but ultimately what people say is it a good shoot or a bad shoot. And a good shoot, not meaning where anybody's glad it happened, but that it's legal and justified in broad terms. I've investigated a number of these, I think maybe 4 over my terms as U.S. attorney, probably watching videos I sat at my desk one day for an entire day watching over and over again the video of the Philando Castile shooting, and others. And so if it's determined that somehow it was justified, fear for life, whatever it is, you have to step back and add the broader question, because we don't have a good answer for why on earth all of these agents are even here. And I can give some perspective on that if it would be helpful.
Yes. Keep going down that road, because there is obvious. I think what you're saying is there's 2 pieces to this immediately. One is regarding analyzing this shooting, this killing, and then there are the larger questions surrounding it that we have talked about a lot on this show. But see, before you get into that, here's to me the depressing part. We have such a fundamental disagreement between Washington and here when it comes to immigration and illegal immigration that I guess I'm having a hard time figuring out. People can talk about truces and, meeting face to face and all of those things. But I just don't see that there's any reason to think that anything rational like that is likely to happen if there's such a fundamental disagreement that, by the way, so far, Andy, it seems to indicate the more you push, I'm talking about the U.S. government, the more you push back on our efforts to do what, by God, we were elected to do, we'll send in another 1,000. That's my fear, is that we are in an endless escalation with no particular end in sight.
I fully agree, and I come at this from the following perspective that maybe cuts through some of that. And, it's not been articulated as far as I can hear in the public debate because it's a little inside baseball, but in some ways it isn't. You have local, state, and federal law enforcement in Minnesota. The FBI, ATF, DEA, all law enforcement agencies have a leader in Minnesota. They're called the special agent in charge. Special agent in charge of Minnesota for the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, and all the federal agencies, including ICE, by the way. You have, and they're put in every state, pretty much, sometimes there's overlap, to work with the locals and the state. We have the BCA and the state troopers, et cetera, and all of whom are charged with working with the U.S. attorney who's appointed by the president but placed in a state to come up with local priorities for law enforcement. And every U.S. attorney, it's one of the first things you do on the job. Every U.S. attorney, Republican, Democrat, whatever, does that. And so what you try to do, and if you're fortunate enough, and it doesn't always work in every state, we've had pretty good results here, is build a consensus. What are our needs? What are our problems? As a U.S. attorney, you then tell Washington, essentially, this is what we're doing in my district. This is what we're doing in my state. We're fighting, feeding our future fraud. We're fighting gangs. We're fighting this. We're fighting that. It's different everywhere you go because they may not have a gang problem in Indiana,
right?
But we do here. And for example, I knew when I was U.S. attorney the first time, there were people in places like Philadelphia who were fighting carjacking. That was one of their biggest issues. We didn't have carjacking in Minnesota. So I'd sit in meetings and shrug, that's right. Good, but not where I'm from. That's how it works. And that's the number one thing you're told. And when you talk to people in Washington, you say, this is what we're doing. And they would always say, well, your state. That's why you're there. And frankly, Republicans were typically better at that because they didn't believe in control from Washington over the states. Democrats a little differently, but that's basically your fundamental job. That's all been flipped on its head today. And that's really where the problem begins. Nobody elected anybody to anything to tell every state what to do. I don't believe that because that's just fundamentally against what we have, state, federal, the federalism principles. And so whenever, and it has happened before when Washington tries to impose a vision, on every state in the country, you run into problems because we're not all the same. And so I start there, and then I go to the fact that we don't have an illegal immigrant crime wave in Minnesota. And your readers can be all over the map on how listeners, on illegal immigration. And that's fine. We can have that discussion. But that's not the cause of the crime problems in Minnesota. And every single local law enforcement agent will tell you that. No one said to me when I was U.S. attorney or my predecessors, or in the 10 months I left when after Joe Thompson was in charge, nobody raised their hand and said, gee, Andy, because we had hundreds of hours of meetings to come up with our strategies and to agree on our challenges in Minnesota. Not one person ever said, what I think our real problem is? Crime, the worst of the worst in Minnesota are illegal immigrants committing crime. That never happened. And again, politically, we can agree or disagree on what we think the priority of illegal immigration is. It's not the driver of crime in Minnesota. It is and has been a bigger driver of crime in other states, Texas, Florida, Arizona. They'll tell you differently than I just did. But of all the places in America to focus a law enforcement operation on illegal immigration, Minnesota would be one of the last. I'll pause there, Dan.
Yeah, and in fact, I wish I have by my desk a story that I've been actually saving. It's a news story from the Wall Street Journal from last week, as I recall it, that I thought did a really good, measured, detached, unemotional layout of much of what you're discussing here in terms of what the numbers actually showed. But here's, if we're going to get to the nitty-gritty, I've learned on this show that there's danger in spending too much time on texts. However, a couple of texts that have just come in the last few minutes, I think capture a belief that we have to talk about and maybe even respond to. And this is, I think, a big part of the problem. I'll give you one of them. All the illegals must go. We didn't open the border for 4 years. They all must go, all of them. That sentiment, I don't know how large it is in Minnesota, but that sentiment exists. So what do we say to those individuals who say, by God, the borders were too open, which, by the way, I agreed under Biden. I thought it was badly mishandled. Hell, you had people from the Obama administration who worked and it said it's not sustainable how many people we're letting in. But the assumption is, well, if you believe that's true, then you must understand all of these severe measures must be laid out and must take place in order to basically bring us back to zero.
Good. And I'm glad you raised that, and I'm glad the person texted that. And I agree with, I assume, the premise of his text and your point that, the Biden administration, failed us on that. I agree. Open, whatever you call it,
right.
Open borders or more open borders was a failure and a mistake, and I disagree with it. However, and I'll say, let me address the person who sent this text, all people must go. That's great as a sentiment. That's great as a desire. And we can argue it back and forth as to what that really means. Here's the problem. And I wish I could talk to this person directly, but I'll talk to everybody. Any law enforcement operation, and removing illegal immigrants is a law enforcement operation. Any law enforcement operation that you do has to be weighed, the benefits versus the costs. We do that all the time. And when we were going after gangs, it's like, do we go after this guy or this guy? What's the risk if we go over after that guy instead of this guy? Those are the detailed law enforcement discussions that have to happen, because your job is to reduce crime. If you want to take it in this context, quote unquote, get rid of illegal immigrants. At what cost and at what benefit, and what are the resources required to do it? So you can't, it's great to say that, and you can believe that to be something that's a goal. Then the question is, how do you do it? What does it take? What are the costs? And the final piece is, what aren't you doing while you're doing that? In order to accomplish the removal of 1,000, 2,000, 500, whatever the number is, of people who are in Minneapolis or in Minnesota illegally, you have to do a number of things. Well, you have to find them. You have to get them. You have to detain them. You have to be accurate in who you're detaining and going after. And you have to do it in a way that doesn't cause, or at least you minimize the risk to the rest of the citizens. So, and by the way, you need a lot of federal resources. It's not just ICE. FBI has been detailed to do this. ATF has been detailed to do this. DEA has been detailed to do this. And so they're not, what are you not doing while you're going? It's not like presto, we press a button and all these illegal immigrants who came in are going to be gone. It's what does it take to do it, and what aren't you doing? So here's an example. Anybody who's detained can have a lawyer file a habeas petition in court to get them a lawyer, find out the facts of how they got here. Most of these people didn't come here in the last 4 years under Biden. Without disagreeing with the premise, the fact of the matter is you got the baker who's been here 20 years,
absolutely,
et cetera. So if they're not committing crimes, they're not violent, they're living here, they're not paying taxes, whatever it is, you still want them gone, that's fine. But that means at the same time, if you've noticed, we're not bringing new gang cases. We're not bringing new carjacking cases, or very, very few. That's a price that we pay. The real crime that's happening in Minneapolis and in Minnesota, the attention and the resources of that has been diverted really entirely to this. And instead, we've got, protesters being prosecuted. Now you're going to have dozens of protesters being prosecuted in federal court. You've got the whole church thing that happened, a lot of attention to that. We're going to investigate the politicians or the elected officials who disagree with this. That's where all the focus is right now in federal court. My old office, that's what they're doing. I thought people like this texter would have thought, we want to uncover as much of that $1 billion in fraud as we can.
Right.
Well, that's not happening. We're investigating victims of shootings, not shooters. So when you set a priority as sort of severe as what the texter just said, there's a lot that follows from that maybe everybody didn't think about when this began.
That's part one of our conversation from yesterday with former U.S. Attorney Andy Luger. We'll play back part two at 5:30, and I'll quickly explain again that the policy of this show, when it comes to replay of guests, is historically we've actually even occasionally replayed the same parts of the same interview the same day, and I'm not sure, like I said, people, well, I know they don't quite understand how radio works. For the folks who listen 24/7 to the fan, we love it. I mean, we love it. We love that loyalty. It's wonderful. But we have we have reams and reams of research that indicates the audience changes the bulk of the audience changes dramatically because people have schedules and they have different times that they listen, which is why even within a show, we've occasionally played back in an interview. I can also show you, if you'd like, because there's a couple people disappointed, the distinction between just how many people tend to listen to talk radio at all on a Sunday morning as opposed to during a weekday is dramatic. So if you're somebody, again, who listens all the time, we're not trying to turn you out or have you tune us out, but we've been doing this for more than a minute or two, and so the idea is let's give a larger audience a chance to get to it. So I don't know what else to tell you. It's really, there's no conspiracy. It's really as simple as that. In addition, it's fair to say that, well, if you feel like the person has offered up some interesting comments, I don't think it ever hurts to throw that out again. I don't want this to be, because one texter said, well, I guess I'm done listening to Sunday sermons. Well, generally speaking, 651 guy, I love you. But we're living in real times, and we react on time. So ordinarily, Andy Luger wouldn't be on a Sunday, because generally speaking, the policy of this, of my policy has been Sunday's the one place where we do stick to sports 99% of the time, because I feel like I got enough other opportunities to get into some other stuff. So we'll just make that sports, as Common says, is your whole life sports. But we had a pretty significant thing happen in our community on Saturday. So I don't feel I'm serving the interests of my listeners, whether they agree with what I say or not. If I go, we're just going to skip to Monday, we'll get to it Monday. Sunday, we're going to go back to previewing the NFC and AFC title games. That's just not going to work in my DNA. And that, I think, is the best explanation. So ordinarily, this would be the first day we'd have Andy Luger on after a story like that. But I didn't think we could wait. I don't think we're serving the listener if we do. So it's really as simple as that. We are going to have top 5 at 5 at the top of the hour. I'll get to that more in a minute. I reached out today, and of course, there are a number of righties who won't like this, but I'll mention it anyway. I reached out today to former Minnesota Supreme Court Justice Alan Page. And because I consider him, as a former Supreme Court Justice, a newsmaker who doesn't speak often anymore, but has been kind enough to give us audiences many times over the years, including at the Great Minnesota Get-Together. And in this case, there's a specific reason I wanted to talk to him, because a photo of Alan Page went viral for reasons that once again offer a cautionary tale about how quickly we jump and assume whatever we want to jump and assume to. And it's just a good reminder, because we all do it. I assumed that what was offered up in this photo was accurate. Turns out it's a little bit more complicated than that. So even without him today, we will get into that maybe after the top 5 at 5, because I do think it raises some pretty interesting questions. Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line is open at 64686 if you haven't been blocked. You're still working on Mondello guy? You're going to work with him?
I'll get in there.
I think at least that we've made him aware, so that, you know, he doesn't have to feel like I'm consciously trying to reject him and, as you say, his comedic stylings. Is that the way you put it?
Yes.
Yeah, stylings I think is the right term. Top 5 at 5 will be toy department related, and it will include what?
Yeah, we'll get back to the toy department. Both winter squads included, and 2 Sanders stories.